72 now. This chapter is chapter 6. It's called Into Action. It's not into thinking. It's into action. And action is a magic word in Alcoholics Anonymous. It says, having made our personal inventory, well, what should we do about it? Now, that's a good question, isn't it? Well, we've been trying to get a new attitude. Remember, Dr. Jung said ideas, emotions, and attitudes were the guiding force of the lives of these people are suddenly cast to one side. So we're trying to get a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator. Remember back on page 45, it said the main object of this book was to enable me to find a power greater than myself which would solve my problem. So I'm trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with my Creator, and discover the obstacles in our path. And what are some of those obstacles? The resentments, the fears, the guilt, shame, remorse, the harm we've done to other people. Those are some of our obstacles in our path. We admitted certain defects. And what are those defects? Column 5, selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate attitudes. We've ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we've admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. This brings us to the 5th step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter.
Okay, we've got to stop now and look at a couple of words. We know that step 5 says we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. But if you'll notice here in the narrative, he said this requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we've admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. In the step itself, he used the word wrongs. But in the narrative here, he uses the word defects. And people used to ask Bill about this. And they would say, Bill, why did you use wrongs in step 5, but in the narrative you used the word defects? And by the way, Bill, what's the difference anyhow between a wrong in 5, a defect in 6, and a shortcoming in 7? Now, Joe and I, we've known 2 ladies that worked with and for Bill for years, and they both tell us the same thing. People would ask Bill that question, and he would kind of rear back and smile. And he said, when I took English and writing courses in college, they taught me not to use the same words over and over and over. Shows how dumb you are if you do.
You know.
He said there's really no difference in these things. He said in step 4, we're going to find those things that block us from God. In step 5, we're going to talk about them to another human being. In step 6, we're going to be willing to have God remove them. In step 7, we're going to ask Him to take them away. And he said you can call them anything you want to. A wrong, a fault, a mistake, a defect, a shortcoming, a personality flaw, or whatever you wish to. And we're convinced in our mind that Bill's just simply used these words interchangeably so he wouldn't be repeating himself over and over and over using the same term. Later on, I followed it up into the 12 and 12. And not only does it in 12 and 12, he does it even worse there than he did in the big book. And we're going to see him do it again here 2 or 3 times in this area of 5, 6, and 7.
He said this is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects.
There he does it again. Instead of wrongs, he uses the word defects.
With another person. We think we've done well enough at admitting these things to ourselves. Well, there's doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find that a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. Many of us are necessary to go much further. We'd be more reconciled discussing ourselves with another person when we see a good reason why we should do so. Well, the best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. It's a good idea, a good reason to go ahead and do the 5th step so we can overcome the drinking. Here's a solitary self-appraisal was insufficient. I did the very best I could do filling out these forms with the limited knowledge that I have. And by the way, I don't know of anybody in AA anywhere that's ever done this inventory process perfectly. So you won't be the first, so don't even try. But a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. I did the best I could do with filling out these forms. To give you an idea why a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient, I can look around the rooms here today and see your defective character very, very plainly. There's one sitting right here on the front row. See, there's nothing between me and Jim except air. I can see him plainly. He can see me plainly. But you see, I can't see me plainly because there's a lifetime of rationalization and justification in me that I just can't see past. I need another human being to look at me and look at these things objectively to help me see things that I couldn't see.
The book says time after time newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they've turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. Well, we think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves, but they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. Now that's the little statement that fouled us up in step 4. Didn't know how to do step 4, so we read about all our life story and we started writing our life story for a step 4. And like we said yesterday, I didn't really learn anything to contribute to my alcoholism by the writing of my life story. If the guy I took it to, if he had really known what he was doing, he might have been able to help me see these things. But he didn't know any more about it than I did. So he just read it and threw it in the waste paper basket. 95% of my life story has nothing to do with my alcoholism anyhow. But I tell you what I've done. If I've done the inventory the way the big book says, I've shared all my life story resentment-wise. They didn't come in my mind just yesterday. They've been popping in my head as far back as I can remember. Some of mine went all the way back to my early childhood. I've shared all my life story resentment-wise. If I did the inventory the way the book says, I've shared all my fears. I've shared all my life story fears-wise. Those fears didn't come in my head just today. They've been popping in my head as far back as I can remember, all the way back to my childhood. If I've shared all my harms done to others, sexually and otherwise, I've shared all my life story harms-wise. I didn't hurt people just yesterday. I've been hurting people all my life. My mother said to me one time, she said, "Charlie, you were the meanest kid I ever saw." She said, "I had a little problem loving you myself." When Mama's got a problem loving you, look out, there's something going on. I shared all my life story harms-wise. And you know, that really is my life story. It revolves around resentments and fears and harms and guilt and remorse and all that kind of stuff. So if we've done it the way the big book says to do it, you know, we have no argument with this statement at all. We have shared all of our life story with another human being. Now here's why we really need to do it. More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He's very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. The inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. Coming to his senses, he's revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes his memories far inside himself. He hopes they will never see the light of day. He is under constant fear and tension, and that makes for more drinking. Psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We have spent thousands of dollars for examinations. We know but a few instances where we've given these doctors a fair break. We have seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. Unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men, we were honest with no one else. Small wonder many in the medical profession have a low opinion of alcoholics and their chance of recovery. I think we have to face the fact that we alcoholics have become the world's greatest con artists. You have to if you're going to be a practicing alcoholic. You can't be a practicing alcoholic unless you learn how to lie, how to steal, how to cheat, how to con, how to manipulate. And I think the one we have to con the most is ourselves. I don't think we could live with ourselves if we had to honestly see what's going on when we're out there doing our thing. But you see, we never have to see those things because we have that convenient little thing called resentments. And we play them over and over and over in our head and gradually transfer all blame to others and make ourselves as pure as the driven snow. Now, if you've been doing that for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, or 40 years, it's almost impossible to be honest with yourself. We do the best we can in step 4. Now then, I need to take this to another human being, one who has walked this walk before me, one who understands steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, according to the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous, and have them help me see those things I can't see about me. They're not going to change anything in column 1. They're not going to change anything in column 2. They're probably going to change some things in column 3, where I said this particular thing was caused by the sex instinct. He said, oh, no. You're just trying to build your self-esteem here. That's all you're doing. Sex really doesn't have a hell of a lot to do with this. Probably not going to change anything in column 4. May change some things in column 5. I said this one was caused by fear. He said, oh, no, this is just plain damn dishonesty. That's all this is. And he helped me see things about me I can't see. The greatest spiritual minds in the world today will tell you the same thing. They never make decisions without first checking it with somebody else to make sure they're looking at it truthfully. I've been sober 35 years. I'm coming on 36. And I've got a sponsor today. And he's been sober the same length of time I have, 6 months more than I have. He never lets me forget it either. He reminds me of it. And if I got something real important in my life that I've got to make a decision on, I always go talk to him. And I'm amazed how many times he says, Charlie, you're blowing smoke up your tail again. This is not true. And he helps me see things I can't see about me. That old rationalization and justification steps in and makes me believe some things that aren't true sometimes. I don't think we'll ever get over it. We need this. Now, I know confession is good for the soul. And if you belong to a religion that requires it, you need to go do that. But I still think we need then to take this to somebody who really understands our program. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, according to the Big Book. Otherwise, it's just going to be a confession. But those that really understand this can help us see the things we can't see about ourselves. Page 74. Page 74 deals with who to take this thing with. Now, you got to remember, in 1939, when the book was published, the first person in California, they didn't have an AA sponsor to go to. The first one in Florida didn't have an AA sponsor. It was difficult for them to find somebody to take this 5th step with. That's what page 74 is dealing with. But today we got plenty of good AA sponsors. We got plenty of good AA members that understand step 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 and can help us see those things we can't see. For me, that's the criteria for who we should take it with. If you belong to that religion, go do it. And hopefully the priest might be a member of AA, and they can really help you with it. But if they don't understand 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, then we need to get with somebody that understands those things, can help us really see these things that we just simply can't see for ourselves. Page 75 tells us how to do this step.
By the way, Donald Rees, have a credit card here of yours. Be up here after the meeting.
Let me have that.
Yeah. I better put that in my pocket now. It says on page 75, when we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. There's that time factor again. We have a written inventory and are prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize that we're engaged upon a life and death errand. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They'll be honored by our confidence. I went over to see my sponsor, Franklin, at that time, and he knew I was coming. I said, well, I'm here to do my inventory. And he said, that's good, Joe. I said, but first of all, let's you and I do the third step prayer and ask God to be with us in this process. That's the kind of sponsor that he was, thank God. And we sat there and began to do my inventory. Now, these forms really come in handy now. I mean, really come in handy. Now, I can discuss these items from left to right. Rather than from top to bottom, column to column, I go from left to right all the way across, gleaning all the information that I can from those columns. And him asking me questions about this particular incident or person, how it affected me, what they do, and what I should have done. Ask me all those questions all the way across. Keeps us in some kind of an order, too. And I can talk about these things all I wish to. I can tell someone else all my life story, resentment-wise, now. And this keeps us in order. When we get through with that first one, then we go to the second one. Discuss it all the way across. Left to right, all the way across, gleaning all the information that we can from it. Him asking me questions about these situations, helping me see things I couldn't see. When that's done, we go to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Keeps you in some kind of order and helps you see things that you couldn't see by him asking questions of things about these situations. Very, very important at these forms at this time. Our book says that we pocket our pride to go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once having taken this step, withholding nothing, we get some more promises.
Here's some more promises now.
We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but
Step 2, we came to believe.
But now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel as we're on a broad highway walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. I don't know about you, but I used to lay awake nights thinking, if I could ever get all this stuff back to zero, if I could ever fix those particular situations, everything would be okay. Well, now after doing this inventory and doing step 5, I could see the steps ahead. I was anxious then to do these steps ahead because I wanted to get it back to zero just one time. And this was a starting place for me to do that. And I love this step 5 and the information that I learned from it, because then I could repair the damage done in the past.
Now, if you've done steps 4 and 5, you've done a lot of work up to this point. You're probably tired. The Big Book's going to give you a little rest stop. Returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. He didn't say 62 days, did he? Every time he mentions time, it's right now. Carefully reviewing what we've done, we thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. We don't know Him yet, but we know Him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals or steps, we ask if we've omitted anything, for we're building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? And again, he's referring to this wonderfully effective spiritual structure, the building of the personality change, sufficient to recover from alcoholism. Step 1, willingness, was the foundation. Step 2, believing, was the cornerstone. Step 3, he told us, is an arch through which we'll pass to freedom, and step 3 was the keystone of that arch. Now we've put 2 more stones in place. We're gradually building this spiritual experience as we go through the steps. Page 76. If we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can He now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. That's all of step 6. And if you'll notice, he didn't say a thing in there about defects of character. Step 6 says we're entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. But here he didn't say anything about defects of character. What he did say are those things which we have admitted are objectionable. Now surely, as we took our inventory and we looked out in that old 5th column and we saw that old selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate human being we had become, when we could see that those are the things that cause us to do the things that creates harms and hurts for other people and causes them to retaliate and causes us to resent, that those are the things that cause us to have all the fears that we got, that those are the things that cause us to hurt other people sexually and otherwise, then surely that type of character has now become objectionable to us. And if so, and if we're willing to have God remove those objectionable things, then we've already done step 6. But please don't make the mistake I did. Because I was convinced that God is all-powerful, and I still am today. And I was convinced that He can do anything He wants to, and I'm still convinced of that today. And I thought all I would need to do would turn to God and say, okay, God, here I am. Warts and all. Zap me and give me the $29.95 special. And I'd never have to worry about that again. But I found out that it doesn't work that way. Because if I want God to remove those things from me, then I have to be willing to do my part. And sometimes when we see those things, even though we can see they're objectionable to us, sometimes we're still not willing to turn them loose. Now, we human beings are funny things. Sometimes we would rather sit in today's pain and suffering, because we've kind of learned how to handle that. We would rather sit in today's pain and suffering than take a chance on changing in the future, because we don't know what future change will bring. If I'm going to have to get rid of my selfishness, then how am I going to get what I want? If I'm going to have to get rid of my dishonesty, how in the world am I going to make a living? I knew nothing about honesty when I came here. If I'm going to have to get rid of my self-seeking, frightened attitude, well, where am I going to get the courage to do the things I need to do? If I'm going to have to get rid of my inconsideration of other people and start considering them, then who's going to consider me? And sometimes we would rather sit in today's pain and suffering than take a chance on changing. And again, I went to my sponsor and I said, I don't think I can do step 6 and 7. He said, why? I said, because if God removes all my character defects, I'm not going to have any personality left at all, period. And he said, you're about 100% right. But he said, what you don't understand is if God takes those things away from you, they're going to have to be replaced with something else. And he said, what replaces them will be so much better than anything you've ever had before. You'll wonder why it took you so long to get around to asking God to replace them. But he said, Charlie, you'll never know that unless you're willing to take the chance. And the book tells me, can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something and will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. Prayer again. Every one of these action steps recognizes self cannot overcome self. We're always going to have God's help. And through the help of my sponsor and by asking God to help me be willing, I finally became willing to turn loose of those things. Now, when ready, we say something like this. My Creator, I'm now willing you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character. Whoop, whoop. We're in step 7 now. And step 7 says shortcomings, and here he calls them defects. You see what he's done to us? He interchanged these words back, and he's confused the hell out of us. That's what he did. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We have then completed step 7. And like I said, I thought all I'd have to do would be ask God to take them away, and they would automatically be gone. But then once again, God's not going to allow another hole in my personality. I've got enough holes in my head already. If this old selfishness is going to disappear, if God's going to take it away, He can't leave a blank in my personality. It'll have to be replaced, and the only thing that can replace it is unselfishness. And unselfishness does not come automatically. If I want God to take away my selfishness, then I must, in every situation that comes up, gather all the willpower I can and get all the help I can from God and start trying to practice unselfishness. And that's very, very difficult for me to do. But over a period of time, as God removes and as I practice the opposite, slowly, 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 the old idea dies. And a new idea takes its place. And over a period of years, I have become a relatively unselfish human being. Practice, 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 practice. If I want Him to take away my dishonesty, then I must, in every situation that comes up, with all the willpower I can muster and all the help I can get from God, I must practice being honest. And my God, it was almost impossible for me to do that in the beginning. But with God's help, I started trying to practice honesty. I quit lying so much. I quit stealing. I quit doing those things with God's help. And slowly, slowly, God removed the dishonesty, and I became a more honest human being. Practice, practice, practice. If I want Him to take away my self-seeking, frightened attitude, then I've got to muster up all the courage I can, and with God's help, force myself to do those things I was afraid to do. And just as importantly, to force myself to quit doing those things I was afraid to quit. And slowly, 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 the old idea dies, and a new one takes its place. Today, I'm a human being that acts most of the time with faith and courage. Fear doesn't bother me very much anymore. But it takes time to do this. Practice, practice, practice. If I want Him to take away my inconsideration of others, then I must force myself with all the strength I can gather and everything I can get from God, to start trying to consider other people first, their needs and their wants and their desires. Damn near impossible for people like me to do. But as we practice at it, it slowly becomes a habit. And the old idea dies and a new one takes its place. And my sponsor was 100% right. You know, life is so much better since I've become an unselfish human being. Life is so much better since I've become an honest person. Life is so much better since I've become a person with faith and courage. Life is so much better when I've become a considerate human being. And he was right. I wondered why it took me so long to do it. You know. Now, God's not going to do this for us by himself. You know, he gave us self-will. He said, you can keep it as long as you want it. He said, I'll let you die on it if that's what you want to do. We must do our part. And as we practice over and over, God removes and we practice the opposite. We change into different human beings. I have been reborn. I have been reborn. I'm not what I was when I came to the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm beginning to realize now what the book means when it said some of us tried to hold on to our old ideas. And the result was nil until we let go completely. You can't become selfish and unselfish at the same time. You're going to be one of the two. You can't become honest and dishonest at the same time. You're going to be one of the two. Always, we have to do our part and work at it. I think we're the luckiest people in the world. You know, most people out there are sick. Most of them are going to the grave sick, not even knowing they're sick. We not only know what's wrong with us, we found that out in steps 4 and 5. Through steps 6 and 7, we have a way to change that situation. And we get to live 2 lifetimes in 1 lifetime. Most people never get that opportunity. Now, make no mistake about this. If you buy into this idea, then that means from this day on, you are responsible for what you are. If you stay selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate, that must mean that's the way you want to be. Because we don't have the luxury of blaming it on Mother anymore. Can't blame it on Daddy. Can't blame it on God, and can't blame it on society. If we stay screwed up, it's because we want to stay screwed up. We don't have to be that way. Most people don't get this chance, Joe.
You know, there's always a paradox in AA, isn't there? Everything's exactly opposite of what I thought it was going to be. The paradox here, to give you an idea of what a paradox is, how many of you have ever called your sponsor so you could listen? A few hands. Most of us call so we can talk, right? It's supposed to be listening.
You end up listening, usually.
You should. The paradox in this 2 steps is this. They took the doctor's opinion in the first 4 chapters to do steps 1 and 2. 3.5 pages to do step 3, 8 pages to do step 4, 4 pages to do step 5, and a whole chapter with working with others. The paradox is this, that 2 of the biggest steps in all of Alcoholics Anonymous are on 2 little paragraphs. That's the paradox. These steps here are the tools of change. They're also the tools of acceptance. There was a movement here a while back about acceptance. Like people just walk around accepting things, you know. I never could do that. Acceptance is not an event. It's a process. And this is the process. 6 and 7. 2 of the biggest steps in all of Alcoholics Anonymous. And where do these come from? These are the 2 steps that Bill added to the tenets of the Oxford group. And there was a story in that other big book about this guy named Saul, S-A-U-L. Saul was riding his, way I read it, was riding his ass on the way to Damascus.
That's what it said.
That's what it said. Big bolt of lightning come down and knocked him off his ass on his ass. That's the way I read it. Saul standing there dusting himself off. A big booming voice said, "Hey, Saul, can we talk?" I got his attention. He said, "Yeah, we can talk. What do you want to talk about?" Maybe alcoholism got our attention too. He said, "Saul, you're very selfish. dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate individual, and you've harmed an awful lot of people, basically. So he told him that. And I want you to not do that anymore. He said, well, how do you not do that? He basically said, do 6 and 7. If you'll do those things, then you'll change. And when you change, we'll call you Paul. And we all know that Paul was one of the greatest writers the world's ever known. And sometime in Corinthians, this guy asked Paul a question. Said, hey, Paul, said, what is the secret to life? Everybody wants to know what the secret to life is. And he said, the secret to life is daily dying. The old Saul had to die, so the new Paul came alive. 6 and 7, 2 of the biggest steps in all of Alcoholics Anonymous. By the time I got to 6 and 7, a little doubt began to come into my mind. Can he really do this? I see what I have become. Can he really change me? Really? A little doubt became in. And I had to reaffirm a statement I read earlier. God either is or he isn't. Either he can or he can't. What's my choice going to be? And I had to choose to believe that he could. And I set about to do that. And see, I see the kind of change, but I seen what I had become. The change is now I'm trying to become that which God intends for me to be. 6 and 7 is the tools of change. Then the tools of acceptance. I have accepted what I've become because I'm not that way anymore. Thank God. Through 6 and 7. 2 of the biggest steps in all of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Tell them about the time you bought the salad.
Oh, yeah.
As an example.
Yeah, as an example, I went to the grocery store one time. Phyllis was working. I liked her being self-supporting also. And I went by the Safeway in our area and picked up some salad dressing and some salad stuff to go home and cook a steak for her when she come home from work. And I was paying up at the cash register, and this little girl gave me change for a $20 bill, but I had only given her 10. And I stood right there and watched her. And I took the money and put it in my pocket and walked out the door. See, I thought it was worth a lot more than that. I sold out for $10. I mean, I thought it was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I got out in my car and I felt about that big. And I got back out of my car, went back in there, and I said, you counted me up too much change. Here's your $10 back. She said, boy, I sure do appreciate that. Said, I would have had to pay for that, you know. And I said, well, she said, thank you for being honest. And I said, well, I'm a member of a fellowship that requires me to be honest. And she said, I've never heard of a fellowship like that before. And I said, well, I haven't either. But until then. So the next time I walked out, I felt good again. $10 little, sell it out for that, being dishonest for $10. God, I thought it was worth a lot more than that.
Practice, 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 and practice. And slowly those things become habitual. And the old dies and a new one takes its place. Just that simple.